Hey guys, it's Dr. May. I hope you're having a good day today. I'm here to talk about sensorimotor psychotherapy. We're in the addressing memory section. And this one is a really important skill for helping you to get the felt sense that you've moved past the trauma and it's over. It's a really important technique. It's also something that's addressed in somatic experiencing therapy, if you've heard of that one. It could be a little bit tricky. So if you're not ready to do it, don't worry, but you could feel free to listen to the video and understand the technique and what's involved so that when you do feel ready, you'll know how to do it and how you could give it a try. Okay. So I hope you'll join me and take a look at this skill, which is a very useful and important skill. All right. If I could only get the screen share going. Aha, here we go. Okay, so I hope you weren't turned off by the title of this because it sounds a little complicated and scientific, right? Recalibrating your nervous system. How the heck do I do that? Do I have to transplant some neurons or something? Well, it sounds more complicated than it actually is. So I'm just going to break down what this means for us so that we're all on the same page. Okay, so recalibrating. Well, that's a pretty big vocabulary word, isn't it? So let's start with the word calibrate, and we'll define these a little bit. So I looked it up just to get a clear definition for all of us. So calibrate, there's a few sub definitions, and one is to correlate the readings of an instrument with those of a standard in order to check the instrument's accuracy. Okay, so let's say, for example, on the bottom here, if you want to accurately determine if a surface is level, there's a true standard for level, right? And if I have a level like one of those actual things like the guy has, I have to make sure that that level is matching the true level, okay? So I have to calibrate it and make sure that it's lined up with the true standard, okay? Just like a compass, if my compass says north, I wanna make sure it's lined up with the true north, not north, northeast or north, northwest, actual north. And if it's not, I have to adjust or calibrate it to match that standard. Okay, the same thing with a thermometer. If I stick it in ice and it says 0 degrees Celsius, I want to make sure it's actually 0 degrees. So it needs to be lined up with a true standard. Okay, you're with me? All right, so we have to do this also with ourselves and our nervous systems. Okay, but let me get to the other definitions first, just to make sure we really got it. All right, so second definition, to adjust such as experimental results, to take external factors into account or to allow comparison with other data. So it has to be not just, within itself making sense, it has to make sense in a broader context, right? So if I'm measuring north, it just shouldn't be north by my own definition. It should be north by a larger context of the world and the earth and the poles and so forth, okay? Next one, carefully assess, set, or adjust something abstract, okay? So our nervous systems are a little bit more abstract than something such as these. So that kind of applies to us a little bit. And so recalibrate means to just calibrate something again or calibrate it differently. All right, so, but the key thing to understand is the calibrate definition. All right, so I hope you're with me. I wish I was with you to check in, but anyway, I hope that makes sense. All right, so back to recalibrating your nervous system, which is the title of this presentation. So sometimes, especially if we've been through trauma, our internal instrument of detecting safety and danger gets a little bit off. So sometimes we think we're safe, but we're actually not. We might miss some danger cues in the context of the environment. Or I might assume I'm in danger or in threat when I'm actually safe. So I might have these faulty neuroception cues, which we discussed in several videos back. I forgot which one we started with, right? So if I have faulty neuroception as a result of my trauma, my instrument's a little bit off. It's not calibrated to a clearer standard of what's actually dangerous and what's actually safe. But it's actually possible to recalibrate our nervous system so that it is more accurate. So today, the technique we're going to go over is called sensorimotor sequencing. And when we complete that process and do it maybe sometimes several times, with different types of memories or slivers of memory, we end up feeling like the trauma is over and our nervous system gets better at knowing what's safe and what's dangerous. So this way we can make better decisions in our life. We don't overreact to things that we think are threatening, but they're not. And we don't overassume safety when we should be picking up on some danger cues, okay? So this is really important for us in our functioning in our daily lives, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna bring us back to the beginning, just to go through this process of how we got to be the way we are and how we could work it through. All right, so here we go. So there was probably some original traumatic situations in your life, okay? So in the face of trauma, the wisdom of our body kicked in, along with our animal defenses. And if we are in hyperarousal, those defenses included fight, so fighting off the danger if we could, flight or running away from the danger, if possible, freezing, so it's like you're kind of revved up on the inside, but still and stiff, calling for help, right? Trying to get someone in the environment to help us out, or to maybe calm down the dangerous person by appeasing, pleasing, or meeting expectations so that they don't hurt us in some way. So all these things were adaptive to us and probably the best we were able to do during our trauma. But chances are our arousal, our sympathetic nervous system, it's kept kicking, right? So it's kept activating itself to triggers. So sometimes we get triggered by something that feels similar, like a procedural memory, right? And we react as if we're in the same situation. That's the procedural memory part, right? It's more of an action, it's more of a feeling that feels kind of similar, kind of the same, like I discussed in that other video. So my body thinks I'm in danger again, but I may not actually be in danger again, okay? So it's trying to help me survive. It's doing the best it can. It's trying to kick me into high gear so I can protect myself, but it may not need that kind of extreme response now, all right? And I'm having a hard time telling the difference. Okay, and obviously, if you've experienced hyperarousal, along with other traumatic triggers and associations, it could be very unpleasant, all right? It's probably not your favorite thing to feel, okay? So if you look at the chart down here, which I pulled from a previous presentation, okay, from sensorimotor psychotherapy, there's a lot of building blocks that are interconnected in the hyperarousal experience, right? So we have very uncomfortable body sensations, such as being easily startled or jumpy, restless, shaky, tense and wound up, rapid heart rate, hard to relax, hard to sleep, sweating, all that kind of stuff, right? That in itself is unpleasant, but guess what? I have all these other things that go along with it. Also, sorry, by the way, physically, I have the movements that go along with it. So I might have an urge to run if I'm in flight mode, or fight or attack if I'm in fight mode, maybe jerky movements, maybe shaking, maybe fidgeting, okay? And body sensations and movements in themselves could be a little uncomfortable. But in addition to that, connected to it, I probably have bad thoughts, quote unquote, bad associations, unpleasant meaning that I made of it, nightmares, flashbacks, obsessive thinking, okay? I might feel angry, enraged, panicked, anxious, all that stuff. Okay, so it could be that, which makes a lot of sense. When I start to get triggered by something that reminds me of a trauma on an unconscious level, my hyperarousal kicks in, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, and I naturally just want it to stop. So I might do anything I could think of just to try to get it to stop. I might have a drink or a drug. I might engage in a target behavior such as self-injury. I might act it out in kind of aggressive way. I might do anything that makes me think that it could maybe go away, right? I could even dissociate and zone out. That could be the next step, okay? But the problem is, if I interrupt the hyperarousal cycle, it's never gonna really finish. It's gonna be locked in my body, and it's gonna be ready to jump back out anytime I'm triggered, okay? My body never realizes that the trauma is over because it just kind of goes up and stops and goes up and stops, and it never finishes itself, okay? So the technique today is about allowing it to finish. So, sorry, I was kind of jumping ahead of myself. So let's look at this statement together, right? So unresolved hyperarousal keeps the trauma alive, right? If we keep running away from symptoms of hyperarousal and don't allow them to run their course and settle down on their own or resolve, our nervous system keeps reacting as if the trauma is still happening, okay? And when that happens, it really interrupts our life. We could walk through life never knowing when we're going to be triggered, never knowing when we're going to feel those uncomfortable feelings. We might avoid things just to avoid even getting to that place, right? Or avoid certain people. So it can make our world small and make us not really live to our fullest. Okay, but it is possible to help the trauma feel resolved and over. So that it's almost like an old car in a field that we kind of just put aside and put out to pasture. And it's not something that's alive and running now in our life, as if it's still happening. Okay, so we have to allow the trauma sensations to finish. Okay, and that could be a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to teach you some techniques to allow it to be a little bit easier and to manage that. Okay, and once we do that, we're going to recalibrate our nervous system so that we'll be better at accurately perceiving danger and safety. And then we can make better decisions in our life about how to cope with situations that make us feel endangered and relax more when we actually feel safe. Okay, all right, hope you're with me now. All right, so I'm going to give you some basic steps on how to do sensorimotor sequencing, which is the technique that helps us to do this. And then we're going to go over some exercises that you could choose to try out if you feel ready. All right, so here we go. All right, so the first step is you have to be triggered. So sometimes we're triggered just by anything, internally or externally, and we never planned for it. It just kind of happened, right? That's probably how it happens most of the time. We could also deliberately, for therapeutic purposes, choose to trigger ourselves by focusing on a sliver of memory that kind of brings our arousal up into hyperarousal. Okay, so you could review my video on sliver of memory if you want to learn more about what that means. But basically, it's like a small piece of a memory that's just enough to get us to feel a little dysregulated, but not over the top. Okay, so the idea is we want to feel some of the hyperarousal just above our window of tolerance or at the edge of our window of tolerance, but we still want to have our thinking brain, our neocortex, available to us. Because part of the process is to be mindful of sensations. And if we're too hyper aroused, we won't be able to be mindful that successfully. Okay. All right. So we're going to have a trigger. We're going to feel some of the hyper arousal. And once we're feeling that, we set the reminders aside. Okay. So the triggers aren't important anymore. You don't have to think about what happened. You don't have to review details. You don't have to review the feelings about it. You don't have to think about images of it. All that could be put aside for this process, okay? So you just want to tune into your body. So we're going to mindfully observe and describe, put words to the physical sensations that we're now experiencing. And as you see here, it says as they progress through the body. So this is where they sequence or move through the body and start to shift and change. All right, and if we really tune in and observe, we'll notice how they do that. Okay, so this can feel a little scary, but when you put the other building blocks aside, it's less scary. Okay, so, and another thing to keep in mind too, it's important to describe them because it keeps our thinking brain, our neocortex online, and that also helps us stay in our window of tolerance or return to our window of tolerance if we already left it a little bit. Okay, so keeping that part of our brain active is really important. So the attention, the mindfulness, and the words really helps with that. And that's important. This way we won't lose control. Okay. All right. So just another visual, which might help a little bit. Okay. So talk about the building blocks a lot. So instead of, let's say, the body sensations, emotions, and thoughts being fused together, which they usually are in real life, we're going to try to separate them out and just attend to the body sensations. Okay, and if they pop back in, you say, thank you very much, I appreciate it, but you could take a rest for a little while, take a nap. I just need to tune into the body. Okay, so you could also refer back to an earlier lesson where we talked about sensation vocabulary. So you could use some of those words to help you describe your body sensations. So things like temperature, hot, cold, warm, things like tingly, pins and needles, fuzzy, constricted, tight, floaty, different things like that help us describe the quality of what we're experiencing. Okay, so that could help us in this process. So it could be helpful to review that first. So when you trigger yourself, that you have it more available to you. All right. All right. So next, so remember again, as I started to mention, that One of the things we should notice in this process is that the sensations change, right? When we're really upset about them emotionally, we don't always realize that. And the emotions themselves can prevent them from changing. It just keeps them escalated. But if we leave that aside and we just notice it, they start to become something else, and usually become something that's more tolerable. So if you look at the diagram on the bottom, so we're going to trigger ourselves when we're currently in the window of tolerance. The arousal is going to go up. And as we notice the sensations and describe them, it is going to come back down. The sensations will become something that we can manage. And it's going to bring us back into a window of tolerance and start to feel like they've passed and they're over. And then we can feel the safety again. Okay. So also, please remember that you're in control of this process, right? The trauma itself and some of the triggering you've experienced since the trauma might have really made you feel out of control. And so the idea of triggering yourself on purpose, part of you is probably like, what are you, nuts? But if you realize that you have more tools at your disposal now, and you could choose to do this, you could choose to stop if you want to. You could always stop and use a resource to bring yourself back into your window of tolerance. You could put it aside, you could come back to it. All of those are options that you now have, okay? Whereas in the past, you may not have been able to access those options or even have been aware that you had options, okay? So remember, you are in the driver's seat in this process, all right? Okay, so just to, inspire you a little bit more, here are some benefits of doing this, okay? Even though it's a little hard, there are some beneficial outcomes, right? So if we repeatedly use it on a painful sliver of memory, right? Something that really got to us, and we do it with the sliver again and again, it starts to deactivate the sliver so that it doesn't trigger us anymore. And isn't that great? I mean, wouldn't it be great to just think of the person who really hurt you and not get completely undone by it? That you're thinking about it and it upsets you mildly, but you move on and it's not a big deal anymore. Wow. That's like a really big deal sometimes, right? So if you do it a few times in a row, or sometimes come back to another time, it really starts to neutralize the triggers. Okay. It'll, like I said before, it'll give you the felt sense, the physical sense, not just, yeah, I know it's in the past, like the real feeling that it's over, that it's in the past. Okay. You might generally experience more regulated arousal in your window of tolerance, and it'll give you a sense of mastery because you've made the choice to do this. You've been able to manage your emotions. You've taken steps to bring them back down. It makes you feel like I'm not just a slave to my body, that it's totally bringing me out of control and there's nothing I can do about it, right? You will have some agency. You will have some power over this process, okay? And relatedly, it'll give you some confidence in your body's intelligence, right? The very first lesson was about the wisdom of the body, right? We will realize my body does have wisdom. If I leave it alone and don't mess with it, it'll know by itself how to re-regulate and recalibrate itself. I just have to get my mind out of the way, right? Think about animals. Animals are traumatized all the time by predators, but because they don't think about it, they're able to just let the sensations flow through them. Sometimes they just shake it off and then they just keep trotting through the woods, okay? Because they're not obsessing about it the way we humans obsess about things and keep the fires burning, right? The fire dies out and they're finished, okay? So we could practice trying to be a little more animal-like in that sense, in a positive way. Okay, another good thing that could happen is when you feel like the trigger is a little more neutralized and you feel that felt sense of it's over or I'm safe now, you're in a much better position to make meaning out of the trauma. Okay, so making meaning is like thinking about, the purpose it might have served in your life and the things you may have learned from it, or how it shaped you as a person, or how it put you in a position to maybe help other people, or the deeper understanding it gave you about humans and recovery or things like that. But it's very hard to do that when you're actively dysregulated and when you're in, hyperarousal mode, okay? Once you're back to that window of tolerance and you feel less triggered by it, now I can make meaning that's much more helpful for me. When I'm dysregulated, I might make meaning such as, this means I'm a horrible person and no one will ever love me. Or how could anyone ever find me attractive? Like you might start to make meaning like that. And that's meaning that's going to make your life worse in the future, not better in the future. Okay. All right, you ready? Okay, it's exercise time. So again, feel free to just listen and take it all in. You don't have to do it unless you feel ready. Okay, you could also discuss it if you have a therapist, discuss it with your therapist, see if your therapist is on board with it with you and maybe wants to work with you on it, help you out a little bit, okay? All right, here we go. So the first thing, just want to remind everybody, is that it's important to be pretty good at knowing what your resources are and being able to use them, right? So in the 3 phases of therapy, the first phase was developing resources, which I had several videos on, right? And I encourage you to practice them in various ways and to kind of have a journal where you're taking inventory of the different resources that you do have or you want to develop. So if you have that already, that's great. And you could maybe review that and practice them before trying these exercises. If you haven't done it yet, I'd strongly encourage you to, because you really want to have some resources, some power, some coping skills to help you come back to your window of tolerance. Okay, if you have no idea how to do it, you might feel much more out of control by this process and much more intimidated by it, or much more afraid of it. And then you might not want to try it again if you have a bad experience. Okay, so I want you guys to have a good experience. So please, make sure that you've practiced your resources first. And if you feel like you tried, you're good, and then you try the exercises and it's still not enough, you could always stop and rebuild your resources and go at it another time. Okay, so don't worry. All right, so here's the first exercise. All right, so this is just a simple one. So it's just called noticing body sensations of hyperarousal. Okay, so I had that same diagram as before. So the idea is we're going to pick a sliver of memory that, starts to activate you just above your window of tolerance, a little into hyperarousal. Okay, and then using your sensation vocabulary, you're just going to tune in, observe what you feel, and put words to it, just the sensations part. Okay, and just notice what it feels like, and then use a resource to help bring you back to your window of tolerance, right? So this will give you some confidence that my resources really can help me. I could be triggered by something, and then I have the power to bring myself back down, okay? So this is a good one to practice with just to start. Okay, so next. So this one is more about the sequencing and observing how the sensations sequence and change as they move through your body. So if you look at the picture of the person here, right, on the right. So the red arrow is probably just some, spots where the sensations might begin, might be different for you. But let's say it starts in your chest. Let's say you feel like a rapid heartbeat and you feel intensity there, and then you start to feel it move, and maybe you feel it move down your arm and it's a little less, or you move through your hand and then it discharges. That might be one course. Or maybe it starts in your gut and your core and it moves through your legs and then it moves out. Okay, it could be something different for you, but those are just a couple of examples. But the idea is that it doesn't just stay the same. It's not the same horrible thing that's going to go on and on and on forever. Okay, so let's go through the steps. So just like the last one, we're going to start the same way. Focus on a sliver of memory that triggers your arousal just to the upper edges of your window of tolerance, but so that you still have your thinking brain online available to you. Use your sensation vocabulary to observe and describe the sensations of hyperarousal you experience. So then you can practice another thing that engages your brain. Try to find a body diagram like that, easy to find on the internet, okay? Or just draw your own gingerbread man, whatever works for you, okay? And as you track your sensations, mark them on the page, okay? Oh, I feel something here. Okay, let me mark it in the same spot in that diagram. Oh, now I feel something here. Let me mark it in the diagram, all right? So it kind of keeps you engaged in the process and prevents you from getting too overwhelmed, all right? Also helps you to be mindful, right? Oh yeah, I'm paying attention, I'm writing it down, okay? And they say that it helps a lot to keep asking yourself, what happens next? Okay, so I feel this here, okay, what happens next? And it reinforces the idea that there will be a next, that it's not gonna be the same, that everything's always in a state of flux, everything is evolving and changing and hopefully decreasing, okay? So continue this process if you could tolerate it until you feel the sensations settle. And if you notice that just by observing they settle, that'll give you a lot of confidence. Like my body really does know how to discharge these feelings, okay? These sensations rather, okay? And after they settle, just describe how your body feels now, okay? And that should be a little different from where you started for sure, okay? All right, next. Okay, so there's just another little spin on it, okay? So, there's different ways to kind of engage this process. So what I did was I numbered the steps of the process on and the description on the right. And then I also numbered them on the diagram on the left. So you have a little bit of a visual to go along with the steps, okay? So similar, we're gonna start a sliver of memory that kind of causes our arousal to increase around to the edge of our window of tolerance into hyperarousal, okay? So that's over here at number 1. Number 2, so what's the first sensations that tell you your arousal starting to increase, right? So I started pretty calm maybe, right? Now, I'm feeling a little something. So describe what's that little something? Where is it in my body? What's my sensation vocabulary to describe that feeling, okay? Number 3, what happens next in your body, right? What sensations tell you your arousal is getting a little higher? Maybe it's in the upper end of the window of tolerance now. Okay, and then what happens next? What sensations tell you you're over your window a little bit into hyperarousal? Then what happens next? How do you know your arousal is returning to the window? Okay, what are the sensations that tell you so? All right, and as your sensations settle, you can describe the sensations that tell you it's going back down. And then when you get back to an optimal level, a comfortable level of arousal, what are the sensations that tell you that? Okay, so at every little level, you're going to use some sensation vocabulary to notice the shifts and the changes. Okay, again, something that could give you confidence that they really do go away on their own. I don't have to do some crazy things, some rash, impulsive, addictive behaviors just to make it go away, because my body knows how to do it on its own. Okay, if you notice next to number 5, and also in number 5 in the written part, there's that little symbol for resources, all right? If you try this process and for some reason you're not noticing the sensations going down, or it's worrying you too much that it's not happening as fast as you really wanted to, you could always interrupt the process and use a resource at that juncture, okay? And then you could try it another time and see if you could allow it to run its natural course. But if for today it's too much, that's all right. Just pull out one of your resources and that should help it go down. Okay, especially if that resource is something you've practiced and it's helped you with that in the past. Okay, so another thought question they offer us is, how can you use a skill of sensorimotor sequencing in other situations where you get triggered? So if I was triggered just by something that happened to me during the day, would I be able to do this? Just like stop for a minute and just tune in to the different sensations as things go up and down, right? So here I might be doing it deliberately for a practice exercise, but where might this happen in my real life where I could actually just put into action because it's just something that keeps happening to me. I keep getting triggered by stuff, okay? So we're gonna apply it to real life situations. Okay, so I put together an example just to help us further understand how we could use sensation vocabulary to note the changes in the, the sensations that we might experience in this process, okay? And now there's no right or wrong answers, right? This is just examples. Okay, so let's start in the left together. So I stimulate the trigger of memory. Sorry, this sliver of memory. I think I'm talking too fast, right? First, feel a little tingling in my core, okay? Now I feel a little trembling in my core. My heart rate goes up. Maybe my breathing's a little more shallow. Okay, that's a sign it's getting higher. Now trembling gets more intense. Maybe it feels a little scary. Okay, maybe I try to put that emotion aside for a moment. Then maybe my core is calmer, but the trembling is now in my arms. Oh, it moved. What's next? Well, it moved from here to here. Okay. Maybe next, the trembling is moving throughout my arms and out my fingers. All right, that's a little different. It's traveling, right? So then, the trembling in my arms and fingers starts to slow down. All right, maybe that's a sign I'm coming back to my window of tolerance. Okay, what's the next thing? My breathing is fuller and more relaxed, and my core is calm. Okay. My body feels warmer and heavier. Maybe that's a sign of a little more relaxation. Sensations are quieting. My heart rate's going down. And now, finally, my body's feeling relaxed and calm. Oh, okay, maybe I'm finished. I survived, right? All right, so this could be an experience you have if you are patient with the process and you just allow it to run its course. And now I'm recalibrating my nervous system. My body's starting to get, okay, I'll get better at detecting safety and danger in real life, right? Okay, I believe this is the last one, but this is another technique we could keep in mind too, okay? So this is about sequencing one arousal cycle at a time. Okay, so let's say there's a memory or a sliver of memory that you really want to work through. It's been something that's been bothering you for a long time. And if you could get to a point where it doesn't trigger you, that would be really great. Okay, so let's say I want to try this sliver of memory. Okay, so I activate it in my mind and I go through one of those arousal cycles. And it's kind of high, but I made it. Okay, good, did it. All right, so next I'm going to try it again. Okay, I'll calm down and back to my window. I'm going to stimulate that sliver of memory again. Okay, so now it's bringing me back up. Maybe I'm into my hyperarousal a little bit, not too far from my window of tolerance. I'm still thinking, but it's not as intense as the last time. Maybe it's going down a little bit. See how the second arrow is a little lower than the first. All right, did a little bit better. Let me try it again. Okay, I do it a third time. All right, it's going maybe not even as high as the second time. Okay, maybe I'm just grazing the top of my window this time. Maybe it's not even hyperarousal. Maybe it's just high arousal. Okay, so if I try it a few times, I'm going to start to notice it's not going to be as triggering anymore. Okay, and that's the beauty of this technique. It really gives us the felt sense that it's not that bad anymore. I'm not back in the trauma whenever I think about that. Okay. And just really tune into how did it change? You know, how is this getting better? Wow, let me really feel that this is different. Okay. If you're still having a hard time with it at any time, you could use a resource to help you get back into your window of tolerance. But if you're able to do it and it works for you to do these up and down cycles, it will have some great benefit. Okay. And much more than just talking about the trauma, which is often recommended in talk therapy, but that doesn't necessarily accomplish this. Okay, a lot of times it doesn't accomplish this. I believe this is it. Yes, okay. All right, so I gave you a lot today. It's pretty intense. So again, use your judgment, do what's right for you, and but think about it, all right? You never know if it's gonna be something helpful. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon for the next one. All right, bye everybody.